This will be the third of my biographical sketches of Rav Drukman. Of course, they are very limited in nature. Before the Six-Day War, the Rav talks about something was happening, but they didn't know what it was at the time. And I'm not going to go through all of the things that he talked about. But about a month before the war, at an annual convention of Bnei Akiva in Eretz Yisrael, they adopted a motion that next year the annual convention would be held in the old city of Yerushalayim, which of course at the time was not in their hands. He says, for some reason, they decided to go up to Yerushalayim, the whole yeshiva, and go to the tops of one of the tall buildings, which was not necessarily the safest thing to do, as there were snipers on the Jordanian side of Yerushalayim at the time that would shoot at whoever they could see. And they went to the top to be able to look over the old city to see the Makom HaMikdash, Har HaBayis, the place where the temple stood, the Temple Mount, and to tear Kriya over it. And also, there was a spontaneous decision to have a relay race from the yeshiva to the Bar Giora police station. Now, Gush Etzion, the settlement block south of Yerushalayim, about 16 kilometers south of the city, 10 miles, had fallen the day before Israel's announcement of independence. And it had become the accepted custom of the widows and orphans to go to the Bar Giora police station on Yom HaZikaron, the day before, the day of remembrance, the day before the day of independence in Israel, Yom Ha'atzmaut. And that was the only place at the time where you could see into the Gush. And what you could see from the Gush was this huge oak tree that is just to the west now of the Yishuv of Elon Shavut. The Oak of Return is the name of the settlement. So they had a relay race from there, from the yeshiva to the Bar Giora police station, where they could look out, the yeshiva could look out to the Gush, which was at the time, of course, in Jordanian hands. I remember one year when I was a Ben Bais of the Rav, at Suda Shlishis, the Shabbos before Yom Yerushalayim, there were only 4 of us in the house at the time, myself, my daughter, Chana, the Rav and the Rabbanit. And the Rav and the Rabbanit were telling us about what it was like at the time on the Shabbos before the Six-Day War began. They said that Friday night, the entire Israeli army passed by the Yishuv going down the freeway, highway, whatever, then much less of a road than it is now. I mean, when the Rav was talking maybe 10, 12 years ago, and the Rabbanit, there was much less of a road than there is now, and 50 years earlier, there was even less. But he talks about all Shabbos long, the Israeli army was shifting position from where it had been stationed against the border with Egypt to the border with the Gaza Strip, Ritzuat Gaza. And when the war started, they could hear shelling. And most of the people that lived in that area at the time were Jews that had come from Arab countries and they were listening. The Israeli broadcast was completely silent. It was only playing music. And the Arab broadcasts were talking about the advances of the Arab army, and there was fear because they didn't know anything else. And there were supposed to be testers coming from Yerushalayim to test the students for the Bagrut, the matriculation from high school exams in Gemara and so on. And the day that was supposed to happen was the day that Har HaBayis was taken. And of course, Matagur broadcast in the clear, not in code, Har HaBayit B'Yadenu, and literally 200 yards away, Kol Yisrael, the Israeli national radio station, picked up his broadcast and felt if he could broadcast that way, that they could broadcast that way. And that was the first time that people were really aware that Israel was winning the war in Eretz Israel. And the Rav said they went up to the roof of the yeshiva to dance. The fact that Yerushalayim was in their hands, and a few days before they had gone and torn Kriya looking over at the Arab-controlled Har HaBayis, an old city. And the next day, the Rav went up to Yerushalayim to visit his Rebbeim, Rav Tzvi Yehuda, and the Nazir. And he told me that the Nazir said that yesterday, the bracha of Yerushalayim in the Midah is Tefillah, kamo Tefillah, Tefillah, Tefillah. It's a prayer like every other prayer. Aval Hayom, Ani Mergish Oto, Ot, Ot, Ot. But today, the Nazir said, I feel it letter by letter by letter. It meant much, much more at that point in time. And it was almost a year later, 11 months later, that a group of people decided to celebrate Pesach in Hebron. They're the only yishuv that had been developed up to that point in time really, was in Gush Etzion, where some of the orphans had returned. And when they returned, one of their leaders, Moshe Moshkovich, decided there had to be a yeshiva also, which is where Har Etzion, the yeshiva of Har Etzion, developed out of that. But Moshko is also one of the moving elements at Or Etzion, because as I mentioned, the yeshiva was for the orphans of the Gush originally. The high school was for the orphans of the Gush. And Moshe Moshkovitz, Moshko, as he was universally known, was very involved in that, as he would later be involved also with Har Etzion. And at this point, at the Seder, Rav Drukman said that they had one room for him, the Rabbanit, Rami, and Yiska. Beria wasn't born yet. And his mother. So there were 5 people in one room. And Rav Drukman was chosen to lead the Seder. And he said, last year, as we were davening in the Seder, we didn't know what we were davening for. We said, Hashtahacha. Now we're here. Lashana haba ba'arad Yisrael. Next year, we should be in the land of Israel. Meaning now we're wherever we are, but we can't be every place near Israel. Now we can go back to Ir Havot, the city of the patriarchs, and celebrate here. And we can be here. And this is he said, Hashta Avde. Now we're slaves. We can't go wherever we want near Israel. L'shana haba b'nei chorin. Next year, we'll be free men. And of course, on Yom Yerushalayim that year, the year before the Six-Day War, a few weeks before the Six-Day War, Tzvi Yehuda gave his famous Mizmor Yud Zayin, the 17th Independence Day of the State of Israel. He talked about, have we forgotten, Eifo HaChavron Shalanu, Eifo HaShem Shalanu, Eifo Kol Regev Regev Adama. Where is our Chevron? Where is our Shechem? Where is every clump of dirt in the ground of Eretz Yisrael? Halo Shachachtem. Have they been forgotten by us? We don't have everything we're supposed to have. And at this point, after the war, they were capable of celebrating in a completely different way. They didn't want to move out of the hotel. At the end, they were staying there. And this created a negotiation between them and the army. And eventually the army agreed that they could have a yeshiva. But how do you create a yeshiva overnight? I mean, if they don't have the yeshiva, who says the army is going to let them back in? So Rav Drukman's chavruta for many, many years, he died only shortly before the Rav, a few months, a year maybe. Rav Eliezer Waldman, who was the 11th grade Rebbe at Or Etzion, they decided they would take the 11th grade and move it. The army was going to let them stay on the army base, which is today Kiryat Arba, and have their yeshiva there. So Rav Waldman, who from the time of the liberation of our land had always wanted to move into it. That's the way that he felt. Rav Drukman felt he never felt that way. He was his shlichut, his mission, his hineni, his fulfillment of God's desires for him was always at Or Etzion and Merkaz Shabira. But Rav Waldman wanted to do it, and so the 11th grade class moved. And I remember the Rav saying several times that there was not a single parent that didn't want their children, their son, going to learn there. And so that was the start of Yeshivat Nir, which of course developed from just a high school into a Hester Yeshiva as well in Hebron, in the beginning of the Yeshiva in Hebron. Things were changing radically. The feeling in Eretz Yisrael was radically different over the next 6 years. A growth in all sorts of things, both physically and spiritually. However, there was essentially no growth, Jewish growth, in the liberated territories. And the Yom Kippur War created a shock to the Israeli system. And many people came to Rav Drukman and to figure out how they should respond. And the famous phrase of Rav Kook, Hatzdikim hatorim enu kovlim et choshech ele mosifim or, enu kovlim et kfira ele mosifim umuna, enu kovlim et barut ele mosifim chochma. That pure tzaddikim, they do not curse the darkness, they increase the light. They do not curse heresy, they increase faith. They do not curse ignorance, they increase wisdom. So the response to every setback that we suffer has to be a growing response in some way. And so Gush Emunim was founded in Rav Drukman's house, in his salon, in his base medrash, I'm not sure exactly where. And immediately they went from there to Yerushalayim to meet with Tzvi Yehuda and get a bracha. And someone said that there should be hundreds or maybe thousands of settlers. And the Rav said hundreds of thousands. And Rav Yehuda said yes. He gave them a bracha that eventually there should be hundreds of thousands of Jews living in the Shtachim. And of course, now we've seen there are close to 500,000, maybe more than 500,000 Jews living in the Shtachim now, in the liberated territories. And Be'ezus Hashem, it will continue in the Rav's way, and these places will continue to grow and develop and become Torah. I will be Messiahim. I will finish this video here, and after this we'll discuss the other things in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War and the way things developed in different ways. Everyone should be inspired by the remembrance of the Rav to learn more and to increase their Ahavas Yisrael.